If that got your attention and you're not someone's dad, you are most definitely going to be interested in what I have to say. The American public school system is a tool made to keep poor people from becoming successful and teach them how to be obedient. It is designed to essentially turn us into zombies, and somehow, no one talks about it anymore. Real quick before I begin, this in no way means that education is not important. It is quite the opposite, actually. The way the system is, if you aren't in some fancy private school or you can't afford college, which is a very common problem, you aren't getting the education you need. Why is the system of education so problematic? Well, back in 1592, the education system in Germany was born. It was the first country to introduce compulsory, or required by law, education. This was viewed as a way to teach people how to read and write who didn't usually have the option. But if they wanted an equality education, that was too bad, as the monarchs wanted loyal subjects and the economy needed well-trained craftsmen, servants, and workers. But compulsory education was now to the lower classes. The nobility, clergy, and urban middle classes had the right to have their children educated in monasteries, noble academies, or city schools under the supervision of churches. It was also used to force Christian beliefs onto young minds for the reign of their ruler, whatnot. Just make them obedient. And sure, the system works really well in a monarchy setting, but very clearly wasn't made for democracy and capitalism, and yet the American government decided to use it anyways. Of course, some adjustments were made, but the fact is that things really haven't gotten much better. The system has barely changed, and there are just too many parallels to the original European model and ours when the political systems are nothing alike. Well, yes, we took religion out of the equation. It doesn't mean the monarchy idealism isn't still there. In order to receive a comfortable and or inclusive education, you have to pay exorbitant prices for private schools, and it only gets worse later on. Though you don't technically have to be a noble or a prince to learn that Conrad is not right. Anyways, you still have to have a bank account filled to the brim that, you guessed it, most of this country does not have. And just when I thought the similarities were over, we just got a new shipment of them, fresh from the factory. Here's a fun fact for you. The average classroom today looks exactly the same as it did 150 years ago. If you haven't seen that comparison, I would be surprised, but that doesn't make it any less relevant to our situation. 150 years ago, schools were curated to create factory workers, and that schedule just remains the same. Dealing with an 8-hour workday, give them a quick lunch break, and throw them back into the fray where they stand in lines and do what they're supposed to. What does this sound like to you? A basic factory job, or just an average school day? Whatever you chose, unless you said something stupid to make yourself laugh, I'm looking at you. It's correct. Great job. You earned an A. And if you felt accomplished just now, that is an effect of learning that meaningless letters mean success. You've reached the status quo. Not your fault, but it's true. Back then, it made sense. These were things that people needed to learn for their jobs, but now we have a completely different view of careers, and schools have to change with those ideas. They haven't. Obviously, in the words of Richard Williams, also known as Prince EA, who has an amazing video called I Sued the School System, do you prepare the students for the future or the past? And if only that was all, college is now way more expensive due to inflation. And in the end, it really doesn't matter all too much because jobs are getting more and more difficult to get. Degree or no degree. According to Kimberly Lawson in 2017, college continues to remain out of reach for many low-income, working-class, and middle-class Americans. Researchers found that while students from families in the highest income brackets could afford to go to 90% of the colleges in their sample, low and middle-income students could only afford 1 to 5% of colleges. While this is already a huge red flag, this was in 2017. The economy has only gotten worse and worse and worse since then. Unfortunately, the whole reason this is an issue and why college costs so much is because they just don't want poor people to learn. The whole system is devised to shut us up and limit the power of the public. And it's 6 times more likely for a kid with a high-income family to obtain a bachelor's degree than one born into a middle-class family and below. That top 10% has all the power, and it's going to stay that way if nothing is done about it. Hell, the current wealth distribution in the United States is somehow significantly worse than it was in France at the start of the French Revolution. And absolutely nothing is being done about it. Likely because our education system is teaching us not to fight back. Sure, there are scholarships, but they really don't go to the people who need them. Not only is that the case, but the only other way of getting support is loans, which are incredibly difficult for someone to get, and also require them to sign up for the drafting system. Not that important, but it's really just another callback to the military thing. But even if you're lucky to receive a scholarship, don't expect good conditions. Not that that'll be a big change, considering just about every public school is severely underfunded and can't afford a good environment. The average public school building was built around 1968, more than 50 years ago. But this isn't really too surprising, especially considering most of us remember having at least one outdated school in our lifetime. Back at my middle school, they weren't even able to afford ceiling tiles in the hallways. You could look up and see mounting glue, wires, and concrete in a good 50% of the building. Not to mention, as I was writing this, I was in my high school building, which is just an elementary school that we renamed, so we didn't have to buy a new building, and it's really difficult to treat seriously. The only decent part is that we have a playground for some reason, which is kind of hilarious, but not exactly helpful. Despite all of this evidence, there are still many people who believe in the system. In this, albeit short-sighted article, titled Why Education in America Stands Out as the Best in the World, we can see that the author, who for one reason or another remains unnamed, probably to prevent from outrage, because honestly, this is why, believes that teachers always want to help you learn, and points out how America's diversity gives you a lot of learning opportunities, which, I suppose there is at least some validity to these claims, but oh boy, is this written in the worst way possible. For starters, it starts off with, from Ivy League university to community colleges that give everyone a chance to learn, which is the most privileged statement I think I've ever read. To call it equal, considering there is no form of college that can give everyone an equal opportunity to learn, all of it is locked behind a huge paywall, community college or not. This article almost makes it feel like it was put on the internet to give moms a point to argue with their kids about. Either that, or it's a bad attempt at forcing the ideas of the public school system down our throats once more. It's almost as if the writer is rubbing it in when they say, focus on critical thinking and innovation is what makes American education different from the more rigid systems around the world. It's not just memorizing facts, but about learning how to apply knowledge in real life. As this could not be further from the truth. It's actually like every single piece of it is the exact opposite. At this point, the lack of creativity in thinking in the school system is astounding, as I'm sure you've noticed. Most schools are just focusing on the science, reading, and math, but there's so much more to it. And I do hope you know that if there's no creativity, our species doesn't exactly advance. And if we can't teach our kids to express themselves, take risks, and create stuff, how are we as a species supposed to go anywhere? Hell, the very man who created standardized testing believed that his method was too crude to actually use in schools because of how it forced any given test taker to think a certain way, which, gee, I wonder what they're doing. Oh yeah, making us think a certain way about something. The only place that this is valid is math, because that's kind of how math works. Anyways, a huge part of creativity is exploration, learning new things, finding articles, and new information is important to grow. Unfortunately, programs like Go Guardian exist to stop us from doing so. GoGuardian is advertised as a software to keep your students safe online, and seems like a good idea until you realize not only does it constantly monitor you, but the school district has complete control over what it blocks. And more often than not, instead of blocking dangerous websites, they choose to block two main things: games and articles. Now, I'm unsure if blocking these articles is an attempt to keep us from figuring out things that this very video talks about, or if it's just a terrible system. My guess is a mix of both, maybe tilted toward the latter. But either way, it keeps us from learning. Even the teachers don't like it. The teacher I wrote this for has us pirate the articles he assigns us half the time because they're always blocked for no good reason. The whole education system is just another depressing failure of capitalism and the free market. The whole point of our country is that we were meant to be equal as long as we worked hard enough. That's the idea that's supposed to be our foundation, yet we use a system made to perpetuate inequality so just the top 10% get to have their fun. I'd like to quote a friend of mine here, as it sums up just about everything about the current state of this outdated system in one wonderful, heartbreaking sentence. Keep the rich rich and the poor poor. That's how America was built. I wish I could tell you there was something you could do to fix the school systems, but I'm afraid I don't have the answers. The best thing you could do is just keep talking about it. With enough public interest, protests can start, and changes could happen, but this is all hypothetical, as I feel like the government is too focused on bombing other countries to actually care about the people that are supposed to have the power. Just do what you can, for God's sakes. Take some time to learn something that interests you that this garbage system doesn't teach you.